Yo, what is up guys, it's Chillfeed here, and in this video I will give you my opinion on what I believe to be the best all-around builds for every character in Borderlands 3 from the very beginning of the game all the way until you reach endgame levels. These are the builds that I used in my first playthrough for every character, and they are the most fun builds I have used for every situation possible without the need of any specific legendary endgame gear, even on higher difficulties. And to prove that they all work with or without endgame gear, I will always show you gameplay of me playing with the most random green and blue rarity gear for every build, as well as some of the better gear to use late game in the takedown. I will also leave a link to the build and the order in which you should pick your skills in the description below, just in case you're watching this video before starting a new game or while you're in the middle of a playthrough. I will try to keep the explanations of the builds just a little shorter so that the video won't get way too long, but if there's anything unclear about any of them, feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below and I make sure I respond to all of them. Please don't forget to just take a second of your time and leave a like at any point of the video if you enjoy my content. And if you want to see more of a German guy struggling to make videos in English, and of course for more Borderlands 3 content, why not subscribe to my channel and join my Discord server with the link in the description and my pinned comment below. And now enough of my shameless self-plugging, let's get started with the video. The gameplay you are watching right now is, like I said, with the most random blue and green rarity gear I found. And keep in mind that some of these weapons are pretty bad. But that's just the way it can be in a playthrough. Most of the time you just pick up the next best weapon with the highest level, so I thought it was the best way to show how these builds work during a playthrough. However, I do not recommend playing on Mayhem level 4 difficulty right after you have the ability to, since the health and armor increases for your enemies are specifically designed for your endgame gear, and even though it is possible, it's not a lot of fun, and I would recommend starting in Mayhem level 3 first. The drop rates in Mayhem 3 are almost as good as in 4 anyways, and the enemies are still a good challenge if you don't own the best possible gears, so Mayhem level 3 will also be the difficulty I will show you in this video when I'm not using endgame level gear, but of course I will switch to Mayhem 4 for the takedown. And now, since I made a few videos about basically the same build on my channel before, I wanted to get this one out of the way first, and this is the build I've been using for Amara whenever I want to have the most fun and strongest mobbing build in the entire game, at least in my opinion. You can pretty much use this build in any scenario, it works great with any of the 3 action skills, but I believe nothing beats this build when it comes to mobbing and clearing out ads as fast as possible. This is because of my favorite action skill augment combination in the entire game, making the best use of Stillness of Mind and Ties That Bind, that in combination with Amara's Face Grasp action skill can just lock every enemy close to your target in place and kill all of them in seconds by simply putting a few bullets into one of them. You can pretty much use any weapons with this build, it has everything covered from long range sniper rifles and close range shotguns, but you should definitely focus on using elemental weapons. This is because of how your survivability depends on sustainment, and you will just need 2 points in there to give you lifesteal for every single elemental weapon you use to keep your health up pretty much all the time. And even though I put 5 points into Infusion to turn basically every non-elemental weapon into an elemental weapon, it unfortunately doesn't work with Sustainment, so it's just there to give you some shock or incendiary damage options on your weapons and to apply at least 1 or 2 status effects at the same time on your enemy. If you don't want that, you can easily put 5 points into Wildfire instead for a chance to spread status effects to nearby enemies, which also works perfectly fine. And speaking of status effects and elemental damage, there's no better character for that than Amara, obviously. You've got increased status effect damage and duration, increased elemental damage, most notably shock damage, increased magazine size and lifesteal with elemental weapons, and of course elemental damage from all your action skills. And I would argue that the action skills themselves are not the best when it comes to dealing damage in higher difficulties. Almost every weapon can come with one of the most powerful anointments that increases weapon damage by either 250% or even 300% on action skill end. This makes every action skill viable no matter what, since you can spam your action skill by the end of this build anyway with Avatar, giving you a constant insane damage boost. The only thing that this build can't do well is melee obviously, but to be honest, Melee is not that good in the endgame anyway and pretty much requires specific gear for that. And for early game you are kind of forced to go down the brawl tree at least until the skill find your center and then you're good. So when it comes to shooting your enemies, you have everything from insanely high damage, crazy reload speed, elemental damage and effects everywhere, crowd control and non-stop action skill gameplay that works in every scenario. Definitely one of the best builds in the game and one of my favorite builds I have ever played with. The gear I would recommend farming for at max level is definitely a Face Lurker class mod, any Victory Rush or Otto Idol class mods, any anointed grenade for extra bonus elemental damage, preferably its piss grenade to weaken your enemies, and then a long list of elemental weapons. Most notably of course a lob shotgun, a boom sickle, the XZ41 hyperfocus, a storm, firestorm or Krakatoa sniper rifle. The monocle and headsplosion are great too, or just join my Discord server if you still want the wedding invitation if you don't have it, but honestly, you can use almost anything with this build. I will also leave a link in the description with a detailed list of every single unique item in the game and where to get them. Make sure to check that out for further information. Going over from the character I have the most experience with to the character I have probably the least experience with. This is not because Moze sucks or because she's weak or anything, it is just that I most of the time didn't really enjoy the playstyle you play with her. Until I played the campaign using this specific build that not only makes good use of her Iron Bear action skill instead of just using him for the anointments to proc, but you can also deal a lot of damage while using your weapons, mostly without having to reload and without dying once. The biggest reason why I didn't think I would enjoy Moze as much as other characters before playing with her was because of her reliance on one single skill in all of her skill trees when it comes to effective survivability, and this is Vampire or Vampire, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. The good thing is though that in Borderlands 3 you can chuck your grenades while you can continue to fire your weapon so that it won't interrupt the flow of the gameplay. Another good thing is that there are several grenades in the game that will clone themselves mid-air, then track your enemies and then explode on impact, ensuring to keep your health up as long as you have grenades at your disposal. To make sure you do always have grenades left, Moze has a skill that gives you a small chance to return a grenade whenever you deal splash damage, and you will deal a lot of splash damage even if it's just from your grenades alone. And because it's not Borderlands enough to just simply deal splash damage alone, you can add some incendiary damage on top of that as well, which will also be increased on every 4th shot from your weapons or from the Iron Bear and every time you land a critical hit. And besides dealing increased incendiary damage for criticals, you will also make sure to regenerate ammo for your weapon by being precise, so you never ever have to reload with a weapon that has a slightly bigger magazine and deals splash damage. And you just rarely have to reload for every other weapon, provided you will hit your crits consistently. For some more gun damage and to add a little more in terms of survivability on Moze, you will equip Armored Infantry and Vladof Ingenuity, and you're pretty much good to go. The Iron Bear is also kinda straightforward, you simply extend its duration and armor, decrease its cooldown time after a kill, and now just 2 more skill points. One will go into Specialist Bear for 25% more damage when equipping 2 of the same weapons, like the insane exploding bullets, and then throw a bubble shield on top that reduces the damage you take while sitting inside your mag. I can guarantee you, if you were still on defense if you should give Moze a try like I was, you will have a blast with this build. Get it? And even if you love playing with Moze, you might want to give this build a try anyway. Just throw on the recently buffed Ogre or maybe even the Boomer, equip the best tracking grenade you have, or again, join my Discord server if you want a good one. Then go ahead and get yourself basically any of her legendary class mods except for the Minesweeper or Rocketeer. Preferably though a Blastmaster for increased splash damage, and then have some fun blowing people up or setting the world on fire. Does anyone remember how broken everyone thought Flag's fadeaway was at the beginning of the game when it first released? It even got to a point where Gearbox nerfed everything they could to make it weaker until they partially even reverted some of the nerfs again. Yeah, see it how you want, but flex fadeaway builds can still be pretty crazy when it comes to damage, especially on your first playthrough when you're not on the highest difficulties yet. And even if people discovered some great rack attacks and gamma burst builds by now, I still feel like they're a little bit too dependent on the according anointments you can get on a weapon. So even though you lack the survivability with this build for the most part, I still think it's the best overall build for Flag because of the insane damage it deals. This build just makes use of the many critical hit and damage boosting skills Flag has to offer, and the amount of one-shots you can deal with this is just pure madness. The build is as straightforward as it can be. You want to spend as much time in your fadeaway action skill as possible, get back to using your action skill as fast as possible, and then deal as much damage as possible in and outside of your action skill. If you do manage to get an anointment on a weapon you like for extra damage after your rack attack hits an enemy, you can simply switch your action skill on the fly, and this build works just as good with the rack attack as it does with the fadeaway. However, the 3 points you spend into Persistence Hunter will now be good just for the added gun bonus, and the extra action skill duration of plus 45% only really works in combination with the action skill augment Guerrillas in the Mist. That way you can get this augment at least somewhat back to its glory days where it lasted 8 seconds instead of 5, and Gearbox didn't nerf that duration for no reason. Of course, Guerrillas in the Mist should only be equipped if you're using anything with a fast fire rate, since you will get just 25% bonus critical hit damage instead of 200%, but just like with the rack attack action skill, you can simply switch to another augment on the fly if necessary. To put it in perspective, with all the combinations of skills in this build, you can potentially get up to plus 454% bonus critical hit damage and more than 188% gun damage bonus on top, while every time you shoot a shot, you have at least a 25% chance to fire a second projectile for double the damage. And since you can maximize your chances at those damage numbers I just named while you're in your fadeaway, you want to spend as much time in there as possible, like I said, and there's a total of 8 skill points needed to do just that. 3 points into head count, 5 points into eager to impress, and just 1 point into the capstone megabore. And it might not seem that appealing to some of you to have a 20% chance to score a critical hit with weapons against any part of your enemies, but there's just too much synergy going on with other skills that it's just too good to pass up on. For example, the capstone in combination with head count, you have the chance to reduce the cooldown time by 2 seconds for every crit you land. And with leave no trace, you have a chance to add 1 ammo to your magazine for every crit, and remember, Flag can make great use of shotguns with multiple pellets in this game, and I cannot wait for the Skull Masher that will be coming back in a few days with the DLC. Now, to make sure you make up for the lack of survivability later on in higher difficulties, you should definitely go for an auto idle artifact to restore some health after every kill, and you should spend 1 single point into lick the wounds to make sure your pet revives you whenever you go down. This is a great skill to have no matter if you're playing co-op or solo. Sometimes it gets super hectic and your pet will be the only one that notices when you go down. And trust me, I think we've all been there before. The only thing you might want to change depending on whether you're playing solo or co-op is the most dangerous skill game, since in co-op you might not always be the one who kills the baddest to receive the bonuses, so you could just put the 2 points into Hunter's Eye and receive a few bonuses without the trouble to kill a badass or strong enemy. With all that being said, the gear you want to keep an eye out for during your playthrough are a lot of the Jacob's weapons, or just sniper rifles and shotguns in general. Sometimes the sticky firing mode for chalk weapons can also work amazing against bosses, but anything with a high base damage works really well. All that doesn't change much when you arrive in the endgame. Jacob's weapons are still some of the best options, most notably of course the Wedding Invitation, probably the best sniper rifle in the game. Also shotguns like the recently buffed Garcia and a bunch of other high base damage weapons. You also have a lot of legendary class mods you can choose from that work great with this build. The only ones I wouldn't recommend is the Friend Bot and obviously the Red Fang, since you will not be using the Gamma Burst anyway. Other than that, there's the Auto Idle artifact that I mentioned, which is pretty much essential for some survivability, and for the grenade mod it doesn't really matter as long as you get an anointed grenade with bonus damage on action skill end or something. In terms of shields, it's pretty much like any other character, although Flag can probably make more use of an M shield like the OM or a rerouter than any other characters for some extra damage in case you still think that the damage numbers I told you before were just not good enough for some reason. Last but certainly not least, my day one character and still favorite playable character in the game, Zane Ferocity Flint is up next with my favorite build for any situation. Although I will say that Zane still might be one of the weaker Vault Hunters if you don't have the right endgame gear equipped, and after a lot of testing around I decided to go against a calm, cool and collected build for this one right here. Even though I had just as much fun with Triple C as I had with this build for my playthrough, I think that it's not quite as strong as the one I have for you right here when it comes to higher difficulties, and you can keep your action skills up just as long and just as easy later on, and you even have the possibility to switch between every single action skill whenever you want. When it comes to Zane's skills, in my opinion, you have to try and get everything you can out of them in terms of DPS, and you have to make use of Zane's ability to have 2 action skills active at once, and there are some amazing synergies between the two things. First, let's take a closer look at all of these synergies I'm talking about. You will get increased movement speed for killing a few enemies and for just having one or both of your action skills active, and at just normal walk speed you get a gun damage bonus of 20%. And speaking of having your action skills active and gun damage bonuses, add another 20% gun damage on top for each action skill active. And if you stick to just killing people and the many bonuses you receive from doing so, you can extend the duration of your action skills even further, have a 50% chance to fire an additional projectile for your next 5 shots and basically double your DPS, get 15% gun damage bonus, 2.5% health regen of your missing health, and 8% lifesteal for survivability, and all of that after just 1 kill. Now keep in mind that all of Zane's kill skills can stack twice, and with just 1 point into Death Follows Close, all of them last for 15 seconds after a kill and get an effectiveness bonus of 25%. Your barrier and sentinel action skill will then make sure to keep your shields up at 100% for another 20% gun damage bonus and even an accuracy bonus of 33%, while also increasing your reload speed and movement speed even further to pretty much speed run through every map in less than a minute maybe. And one of my favorite things about Zane has always been the ability to have more than one action skill active, just due to the fact that the trade-off for having 2 action skills at once is to not be able to throw a grenade by yourself, and this trade-off can be so easily avoided with just a few skill points, and I chose to go with the drone delivery skill for the sentinel. And since this build can make use of any action skill, this will probably be the only skill that's really interchangeable depending on what playstyle you want to play. For example, if you want to play with the barrier and the clone, you can simply put that 1 skill point into fractal frags and everything's fine. In every other scenario though, I would go with the drone delivery. And if all this was a little confusing for any of the new players, let me sum up your playstyle real quick. First, activate your action skills and keep them active forever. Then kill a bunch of enemies while being pretty much invincible. Run around like a maniac and even benefit from that. And then let the game worry about throwing grenades for you. Now all you need is the Seeing Dead class mod, which if you own the DLC is a must have for every Zane player out there, and there's no excuse for not having one by now. And if you don't own the DLC and for some reason don't want to get it, grab yourself an Executioner class mod and just have fun with pretty much any SMG or assault rifle in the game. And with that being said, that's it from me. If you are still here watching, you are an absolute legend. If not, I don't know, you won't hear this anyway, but thanks for everyone watching. Please don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed this or found it helpful. Let me know if there are any more questions left and subscribe to my channel for more content in the future. And with that being said, I'll see you in my next video.